In this video, I show how to remotely download stock, options, and fundamental data using the ticker object of the yfinance library. First thing to do is to install the yfinance library by using the pip install command and then import the appropriate libraries. We're going to be importing pandas as PD and yfinance as yf. Yfinance ticker object is going to be taking several parameters, among which these lists are the most important. The start and end dates, the period, the valid periods, intervals, the argument actions that takes a boolean, and whenever it's true, it will include information on both dividends and splits of the company. The pre-post, it's also a boolean that is going to be giving you the pre-post and regular market hours data of the company that you are choosing. So let's start by creating a symbol of the company we want to get the pricing data. It is going to be Apple, and we are going to be setting the ticker object as the ticker. And we're going to be saying yfinance equals to ticker, and inside we're going to be including the symbol that we have just created. So this is the instantiation of the yfinance ticker object into the ticker variable in our Python environment. So we are ready to start downloading data using the ticker object of yfinance. So let's say we want to obtain a data frame that is going to be taking historical data. This is why we're going to be using the history option in the ticker object in the yfinance library. So we're going to be setting a start date equals to, say, 2019. The 1st of January. The end date, let's say it's going to be 2020. Also the 1st of January. So let's run this line of code and we can see if we inspect that data frame, we see that we obtain the pricing, the daily price of the stock of Apple from these starting date to the end date that we set in the beginning. Good. So notice that by default, the actions is equals to true. That is why you are receiving the dividend and stock splits information. So we're going to be setting it equal to false and round the numbers to 2 decimal digits, with the option true for the rounding a parameter. So we're going to be seeing that for the rounding parameter, in this case, this is going to be taking only a boolean. Let's say ticker, then history, then the start. We're going to be copying the same code that we have just written here. And in addition, we're going to be saying actions equals to false to not receive the information on dividends and stock splits. And we're going to be saying that the rounding is going to be equal to true. So we get 2 decimal digits for every price of Apple. So let's inspect this data frame and we see that this is exactly what we wanted. This is the data that corresponds again to the daily price of the stock of Apple, but we can increase the granularity of the data. For example, we're going to be using the period parameter instead of the start end date parameters and set the granularity of the stock price to, for example, 1 minute by setting the interval parameter to 1m. So let's copy this information, this code, that we have written here, and we're going to be saying using, instead of a start and end, we're going to be using a period equals to, say, the maximum amount of data that Yahoo Finance can provide to you. So the actions equals to false, the rounding equals to true, but in this time we're going to be using the interval parameter and set it to 1 minute in order to get the minute by minute price of the stock of Apple. But notice that when we request the maximum period of available data, we receive a message saying that only 7 days worth of 1 minute granularity are allowed to be fetched per request. So in this case, let's comply with these requirements. For example, instead of setting the period equals to max, we're going to be saying that we want 5 days. The other information we're going to be saying that is going to be exactly the same. In this case, we're going to be setting also the pre-post equals to false. We're going to be explaining what is the difference between false and true in a minute. So let's inspect the data that we received. And as you can see, you have received the minute by minute price of Apple over the last 5 days that we have defined here with the period argument. So we can inspect, of course, the information in order to see what are the ranges of the time of the prices through time. And we can see that it starts from the 15th of November of 2021 at 9:30, the minute by minute price up to the 19th of November of 2029 at 3:59. So this corresponds with the trading times for this stock. So normally notice that this is the normal trading times, but you can also request the pre-post market data. Okay, so in this case, what we can do is set this pre-post parameter equals to true. And what is the thing that we received? So let's inspect the data frame, the head of the data frame. So in this case, let's check also the tail. And we can see that this is starting from this date, the 15th of November, which is the same as we had in previously when we set the pre-post equals to false. But what changes is the time that we have where the first pricing starts. So this is starting from 4 o'clock and up to 8 o'clock for this range of days that we requested. So we can say df info in order to take a look at the range, and we can see that this is the price that includes a pre-market hours, the market hours, and the post-market data. Okay, so that is how you use the that is the reason why you would use the pre-post equals true. So this is for a stock of a company that is traded in normal times. But for example, if you wanted to download information for Bitcoin, for example, we're going to be setting the ticker of the Bitcoin symbol. We're going to be saying ticker is going to be equal to YF ticker and equal to, and as an argument, the symbol. So we can say that, let's copy this information just to get the data for Bitcoin, the 1 minute data for Bitcoin. And first of all, let's set the pre-post to false. Let's inspect the information of this data, and then we're going to be downloading the same data but with a pre-post equals to true. So in this case, it makes no difference with regard to the range and the prices that you are receiving, because this is not a Bitcoin is trading all the time. This is not traded only in normal market time. So as you can see, for example, we receive exactly the same range, exactly the same number of information as if we set the pre-post equals to true. Okay. Good. You might also wish to download market data for multiple stocks. So let's see how to do that. So we're going to be saying symbols, and suppose that we want information for the stock of Apple, the stock of Facebook, and the stock of Google. So you need only to include the symbols separated by one space and inside quotes. So we're going to be setting or instantiating the yfinance ticker. But this time, instead of ticker, it is going to be tickers with an S. So we include exactly the symbols that we have created, and we are ready to use it. So we say df, then ticker history, for example, the interval that we're going to be using. Let's say it's going to be 1 day, and starting for this example is starting on the 1st of January of 2020. Let's set again actions equals to false, and the rounding parameter equals to true. So I need to include it with an I. Let's run this line of code and let's inspect this data frame that we have received. So notice that we have now received a multi-index pandas data frame with the type of price. For example, this is the closing price, the high and the low price, and so on, as the first index level, and the symbol of the company, this Apple, Facebook, and Google, as the second index level. So this is the way that we receive the information from Yahoo Finance. But we can, of course, download this data, but we are going to be able also to select the information if we wish to, for example, just choose the closing price of a given number of companies, of very specific companies. So we can use the multi-index slice to select a specific column or a set of columns on a multi-level data frame. So how do we do this? So for example, let's instantiate the PD index slice function in pandas in an object called IDX, and then we're going to be using the log function in order to get the data that we want. So what are we going to be using? First of all, log takes the rows and then the columns. So for the rows, we want all of them. So we are going to be just putting this column in here. So because we want all of them for all of the periods that we have requested. But with regard to the information related to the columns, suppose that we want just to get the closing price of only, say, Apple and Facebook. How do we do that? Well, in the log function, we're going to be calling the IDX object that we set. And in the IDX, what do we want to do? Well, we want to include, first of all, the first level. Notice that the first level, as we said, is going to be the type of price that we receive. So we're going to be saying, okay, I want the closing price. And then I need to define the second level. So given that, for example, I want information on both Apple, the closing price of Apple and Facebook, what I can do is just to include as a second parameter for the second that represents the second level, the Apple and Facebook symbols. So let's run this command and we can see that what we receive is a data frame that is also a multi-index data frame that has as the first index the type of price, which in this case is the closing price, and as the second level we have the Apple and Facebook stocks. So this is how we can filter some information that we might wish to extract from the raw data that we received using history option in the ticker object of yfinance. So there is another way, of course, to do that. Suppose that we want the closing price. So the only thing that we need to do is, first of all, call the closing price, and then with another square brackets, inside another square brackets, we're going to be saying Apple and Facebook. So we run this line of code and we obtain the same information, with the difference that this time we don't have a multi-index. We only have the information corresponding to the closing price for Apple and Facebook, but the symbol is going to be the single index in our pandas data frame. Okay, good. So if we wanted to notice that this information we are receiving as the closing of high, low, this is the pricing information, and then this symbol information. So we can use the group by parameter to inverse the indices of the data frame. So how do we do that? Let's copy this code. And we're going to be saying, we're going to be writing, the interval is going to be also 1 day. The start is the same date. We're going to be rounding it, but we were going to be using the group by parameter, and we're going to be saying that we want to group the data by tickers. So in this case, if we run this line of code and we inspect the data, instead of having the pricing type as the first level, like in the previous case, we now have the symbol as the first level. Okay, very well. So we can inspect, of course, the head of the data frame, and we have the same information. How can we download fundamental data? So in this case, this is market data that corresponds to the stock of Apple on a daily basis. We have shown how to do it on a minute-by-minute basis, but let's take a look on how to download information about the company Apple. So again, we're going to be setting the ticker with the symbol inside. So we can obtain a lot of information, like for example, the information on Apple. If you run this line of code, what you're going to be obtaining is a dictionary, that contains information of the company about the zip, the sector, number of employees, the business summary, and so on. So this is the long format that you receive as a dictionary. So if you want to take a look only at the keys, for example, we can say ticker info, and because this is given in the form of a dictionary, we can call the keys in order to take a look at what are the what is the labels of the information contained in the dictionary. Okay, so for example, if we want to take a look at it, inspect it in a more formal way, or a more organized way, not formal but organized, we can put it into a pandas series where we include the information of the ticker. So let's take a look at the 15 first pieces of information. So as you can see, in this case, you receive it in a more organized way. If you wanted to call only one of these pieces of information, then you could say ticker, then info, and then include in parentheses. For example, we want to take a look at the long business summary of the company Apple, and we receive the information for that key. Let's say, for example, we want data, fundamental data that is going to have a range or a period of, say, 10 years for the stock of Apple. So you're going to be instantiating the ticker into the data variable. We are going to be taking a look at the data, for example, and we receive the pricing data because this is the history function. But we can take a look at the individual actions of Apple. For example, individual actions meaning the dividends and stock splits. We can take a look, for example, at the dividends, and this is for that same period. This is going to be ticker dividends. We run this line of code, and we receive the dividends that correspond to that period of time that we set as, for example, in this case, 10 years. There are other pieces of information that you can get, for example, the splits of Apple, the ticker financials, for example. But notice that this is a more limited scope in the ticker financials that you are going to be requested. You can request the financials on a quarterly basis by saying, for example, quarterly financials, and you receive it on a quarterly basis. Receive them on a quarterly basis. The same with regard to the balance sheet of the stock of Apple. You can request it as the quarterly balance sheet of Apple. Okay, so you have this information, but notice that this does not correspond to the period that we have requested. Here the information is more limited. You can request the cash flow of Apple. You can request the earnings, for example, by saying ticker earnings for these years. Again, this is limited information. You can get the sustainability, the ranking or the scores of this particular company, if you're interested in this type of information, as well as on the recommendations from the several financial actors. Finally, for example, you can also get the calendar for the events, or for the events of the company. For example, the earnings date, the announcement, and so on. Okay, very well. So we can also download option dates by using the ticker options. First of all, by calling the ticker options. And we're going to be getting a list of expiration dates. So in this case, the first thing that we need to do, it is just to select an expiration date. For example, let's call this variable expiration date, and it's going to be equal to the ticker to the first element of that of this list, of this tuple of dates. So we want the options on the expiration date of the 26th of November of 2021. So we're going to be running this line of code, and then we're going to be saying options is going to be equal to ticker, and in this case we can we're going to be calling the option chain option with the argument expiration date. So what we're going to be receiving? So for example, it depends if we want information on options, for example, on the calls of Apple, pardon, it is calls with an S. So you are going to be receiving the contract symbol, the last trade, the strike, the last price, bid, ask, etc. So if you want to take a look at all of the information that is contained with regard to the calls, you set info, you request the info, and you can see the columns, the pieces of information that you receive, as well as the number of entries that you will receive. Okay. This is with regard to the options calls. You can also download options puts, and this is going to be this type of option of the company Apple. So as you can see, you can do exactly the same, say options put, and then requesting the information. It is, again, this needs to be set with an S. So this is it. This is how we download a market option and fundamental data by using the ticker object of the library yfinance. I hope that the video is useful and hope to see you on the next one. Thank you very much.